Today's conversation is with Amrit Singh. Amrit is a life coach and spiritual teacher. Just a quick heads up before this episode starts, having some technical issues on the podcast. There is no video, so it's audio only. And yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation though, regardless with Amrit. We talked all things in terms of your purpose, in terms of how you could be living out of alignment, and we start speaking about meditation and returning to the present moment instead of living with the future. So I do hope you enjoy the episode. I do hope you take some value from it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe or follow the Playbook podcast wherever you are listening to this episode. But yeah, enjoy. Amrit, welcome to the Playbook. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Pleasure is all mine. So I'm just going to get straight into it, Amrit. In your opinion, based of your experiences, why are so many people living out of alignment in the current day?
Oh, wow. Big question. I think it's our natural state. When we're born, we're coming in here in alignment. And then I think really through actively growing up and doing the things we should do and doing all this, going to school, having a job, taking care of life, we allow ourselves to come out of alignment. Luckily, we need to sleep every day, and that's a time where we naturally get back into alignment. But for most people, that's not enough.
And how how would I be able to tell if I'm currently living out of alignment?
I think the best way to tell is how connected you feel with your being, right? How connected do you feel with your body? How connected are you with your emotions? And how you're not just this mind that's being walked around on a body with the distraction of emotions that come up during the day, but how all these pieces come together and how you're really feeling whole rather than segmented.
Okay. Yeah, because it can be tough sometimes to get yourself out of your mind and into your body, as you said. I know that you do a lot of Kundalini Yoga, and has that helped get you into some sort of alignment? Like, what are some of the practices that help you get into alignment or have helped you in the past?
Yeah, I mean, really anything physical with the body helps you get more connected, helps you be more present, be more in alignment in that way, right? To live life in the present moment of the here and now, rather than being stuck in the past or in the future. And so Kundalini Yoga worked great for me, but I don't think it's the ultimate path. There's certainly, hundreds and thousands of different ways how you can help your body to get back into alignment and get in the present moment. And back to the example with the kids don't need to do anything, right? They just run around, play, have fun, and they're in the present here and now all the time, and therefore aligned. So I think it's really important for us to remember that this is not something, we need to strive to get to. It's more something we need to allow to come back to our natural state of being in alignment, because that's what the body wants. That's what our self and our whole being wants. And so the body will always strive to try to get back there. It's really us getting in the way and manipulating that.
Yeah, it's something that is quite common in terms of being stuck either in the past or kind of fear of the future. It almost, in my experience, speaking with some people, it's either one or the other. Either they're kind of almost trapped in the past or ever living in the future. An issue that I have had in the past is fearing about the future, kind of reminiscing about what will be or what should be, and striving for how I'm going to get there instead of actually being in the present, because I felt in the past that there was confliction between the being and then the wanting. So there was a confliction between being present and that taken away from me striving for more, that I was afraid that I would be in some sort of a comfort zone if I was almost too present, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting way to look at it. It's certainly the comfort zone is a place we strive to be at, right? Because we want to be comfortable. It's part of our ego is searching for that in everything we do. But at the same time, it's important to have that challenge to stretch ourselves and have that vision and think about, okay, what do I want? How do I get there? What's the path to take? It's a little bit like when you want to climb a mountain, you're thinking about the future, seeing yourself standing on top of the mountain. So that's an important piece. But at the same time, you also need to be in the present moment so you can put one foot in front of the other and look at your path so that you're able to make it there. So I think it's this balance between knowing what you want in the here and now, and at the same time knowing what your goal is and where you want to be at in the future.
Yeah, and I suppose it's aligning yourself with intrinsically kind of who you are. Um, a lot of times it's easy to kind of paint yourself around with pictures of the act of who you are currently, not who you are intrinsically, and covering that in terms of your ego of like, okay, what are societal definitions for you rather than who you are as a person. How do you recommend for people to find out who they truly are rather than kind of what society deems as their purpose?
Well, first of all, you need to make a separation between the two, and you need to realize that even though we're influenced by our upbringing, by our parents, by society, by the people we spend time with, all these pieces are the way how the ego makes it through life. But when you can really get quiet and when you really can go deep and you can really connect with your essence, where all those things fall away, right? The best example of this is when someone asks you, "Who are you?" And you say, "Oh, I'm this kind of worker. I do this kind of sport. I'm a man. I'm whatever. These are all just ways to identify yourself, but ultimately, in your essence, you're so much more than that. And so for me, I think that the most powerful tool I have found is meditation. And it's just coming to that quiet moment where you can connect with your essence.
And meditation almost seems like some sort of a buzzword these days. Like, and it's hard. Some people speak to me and it's like, oh, I can't, I can't meditate, or meditation isn't for me, or I don't believe in meditation. Because it's gotten, it can be so broad for some people. They're kind of expecting that quick fix.
Yeah. Oh, and this is actually my favorite thing when people say this to me and saying, I don't think I can meditate. And what I remind people of is, again, going back to our early days, right? When we were in our mother's womb, all we did was meditate. And then
Mm.
even after we were born, if you watch a baby nursing, they go into this deep state of meditation. That's just their being. That's their essence, right? Even when you watch your pets, your dog, your cat, they have this ability to just be completely still and be in this meditative space. So I'm a strong believer that really anyone has the ability to meditate deeply, which is an intrinsic ability, which is not something you need to learn. You already know how to do that. You knew how to do that before you learned all the other stuff. So it's really just a remembering to come back to this inner ability of becoming quiet. And that's where exercise can help. That's where yoga can help to just, connect with the body and really become present, because that makes it much easier to get into meditation.
Yeah, completely. It's something recently that I stumbled across was when I started getting into running a bit more. It was exactly that. It was becoming and coming back to the body, doing something that was difficult and focusing purely on my breath or focusing on my body or moving and silence within myself for a few hours. And the deep meditative state that has allowed me to go into was transformative into other aspects of my life. So to give a bit of background, like being in Dubai, I'm working in a real estate role, which can be a performance based role. So for me, it's really important in terms of how I feel on a day to day basis and how that can be mapped to how well I do. So
Yeah.
it's vital for me to have these practices to bring me back to my body, to stay present, because as I said before this conversation started, Dubai can be very overwhelming. It can almost feel like this hustle culture of you constantly have to be moving forward. Only by keeping my 2 feet on the ground, only by having meditative practices and being present in little pockets of my day or my week, has that actually allowed me to perform better in my role and ultimately feel a lot better along the way, because the journey is the same. It's just how I feel around it. I don't have to be so strict on myself. I don't have to be so harsh on myself. It's all about the feel of the journey. It feels a lot more enjoyable. I feel more aligned because there was definitely disconnection between the job I was doing and who I was as a person. But I found massively that it definitely does impact in terms of your day to day and helps you get to where you need to be, even though the lines may be blurred sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And it really, like you said earlier, meditation is such a buzzword now. It's really about finding a tool that works for you, that allows you to connect with yourself. And whatever that is, right? Meditation is just a really convenient way to do that. But especially for beginners, I think, a running practice or just going outside to walk and just be with yourself is just as powerful to open that door, and then slowly to get into a habit where you can say, I meditate for 5 minutes a day and I just practice being still with myself. And that comes much more naturally in that way.
Is this something that you see? Like, what would be some of the common issues that some of the people that you work with face in terms of that?
Probably the most common is the distraction and the disconnection from self, right? To see that essence, which we all have in ourselves, as something separate from who I am or what am I doing or how I'm living my life. And so when these two things start aligning, that's, when success happens, like you were saying, that's when you are performing much better in your job. That's when your relationships get better. That's when the relationship with your body and your health gets better. But that's really the foundation, that connection first, so that those other pieces can fall into place.
And and in terms of when I was going through some of your work, you were speaking about kind of leading with love and how much that has an impact. And what is that? If you could tell me more about the kind of the importance of having love.
Oh, it really starts with self-love. And self-love is much easier for your inherent essence and for your true being, because that's truly you. And when you develop that relationship and that connection with you, you can really accept yourself fully and love yourself fully. And so that's that's for me like the biggest benefit of meditation is to go deep into really finding out who and what you are. Because it's hard to love that, you're a doctor or you're a married man or you're whatever you're defining in the outside world, because that's so influenced by those outside influences, those distractions. There's some days where you feel great about it, other days you don't feel good about it. When you develop that relationship with yourself, you can always feel good about that because that is you and that's your essence. And so that's really where that love can flourish.
How does one begin to start loving themselves?
I think the path is to start knowing yourself and to really knowing your essence and really knowing what you're about and why you're doing all of this. And so the moment you start exploring that, there's a lot of love there. Most people I talk to say, I want to help others. I want to serve. I want to go out into the world and do good. I haven't yet talked to one person who said, I want to do horrible things to the world because that's how I experience myself, right? So it's really that
Mm.
that catch 22, what comes first. But as you are as you're connecting deeper with yourself, you can connect much deeper and profoundly with the world.
I completely understand where you're coming from, because I've had this in my past where I'm almost pouring from an empty cup, so to speak. It's like, because I've sacrificed myself and my happiness for other people, I am pouring from an empty cup, and I can't provide them with the amount that I could if I first loved myself first of all, and then if I focused on improving myself or improving my capabilities or improving my intellectual kind of capabilities or my financial stability. And I felt some sort of guilt for that. And it's only when I realized that there are certain things that I have to be selfish about in the current day, because in the future, then I can reach a larger pool of people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Because, and I love that example with the empty cup. If you don't take care of yourself, you have nothing to give. And so, really prioritizing your self care, prioritizing having a full cup is not really selfish. It's more selfless because with a full cup, you can share with others. With an empty cup, you can't share anything.
And how does, like, I've spoken to some people in the past, and it's kind of finding the balance between the kind of self acceptance and self improvement, or the self love and the self improvement. It's like, how do I hold two conflicting ideas that, yes, like, yes, I need to accept myself in my current state, but also, like, how do I balance that with the fact that I keep wanting to improve and almost, quote unquote, get better?
Well, back to our childhood, right? That's exactly what we want from our parents. We want to be accepted as where we're at, right? With 5 years old, you have certain level of capabilities, but you're not there yet. And so it's really important to have that acceptance, to be able to be in the present moment, and then challenge yourself in the right ways where you can grow, where you can try out new things, and where you can expand, but expand at the right pace and in the right balance so that you can continue to hold that level of acceptance for yourself.
Yeah, completely. I can completely resonate with that. And in terms of your journey, or how you got to where you currently are today, how did some of that self love look for you, and what was your journey with that, and has it always been your opinion today as it was maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago?
No, most certainly not. I mean, there was a lot of struggle along the path because it's very easy to fall into this idea of, oh, I'm not enough. I need to push harder so that in the future I'm enough. and I'm good enough, and I'm, like providing enough, and I'm spiritual enough, and I'm kind enough, or whatever it is. But ultimately, the biggest breakthrough for me happened when I was able to slow down and practice that self acceptance, where I could say, what it is right now is enough for today, because that's who I am today. And it's not going to change just because I want it to change, but I'm, present in this moment. And at the same time, I can challenge myself to grow, but not to grow because I'm not enough today, but to grow so I can be even more tomorrow. And that's exciting. And again, back to that example of a kid, right? You don't want to tell your 8-year-old that they're not enough because they can't do what your 18-year-old can do. So it's this reminder to that kid to say, you are enough. You're great in what you do. And now challenge yourself a little bit. Step out of your comfort zone. Don't just settle for being at that 8-year-old standard for the rest of your life, but allow yourself to grow. But not because it's not enough what you have today, but because you want to have more in your cup, right? It's almost like rather than filling up your cup, which is being enough, is expanding your cup. So your cup can get bigger and you have more to give.
Yeah, that really does resonate with me. It feels like sometimes with me, or sometimes in my personal experience, it's been the goalposts are almost ever moving because I always said that I was going to be happy, or that enough was going to be enough when I get to a certain point. But when I get that point, it's not being present. It's not returning to that kind of childlike state, and it's just moving the goalpost further, and it's just pointing it, another few 100 meters down the road and being like, okay, that's when it's going to be enough. That's when I'm going to feel better. That's when I'm going to be able to love myself almost. It's like just a bit further. And then that's just a constant cycle of not being present and then pushing the goalposts further.
Yeah. And that's extremely frustrating. And it's super demotivating. And by the time you're 35, 40, you're asking yourself, why am I doing all of this?
Mm.
Versus the other approach where you can really have your cup be full, even though it's a small cup, but it's full. And that's what I like about that example, because that is enough. You're enough in the moment, and that's where you can be happy for being enough. And then the moving goalpost can be to say, okay, now that my cup is full, I can expand it, I can make it a bigger cup, and then I can fill that cup again to be enough again in that bigger space.
Mm. Okay. Interesting. Really, really interesting. And in terms of like that kind of childlike state of mind, or that child and returning to that childhood, it feels like sometimes it's easy to kind of lose that and lose that child's like kind of ambition or romanticism, and lose that kind of childlike essence of being, and almost be maturing way too quickly, and feeling like that life is too serious. I think it's sometimes it can be difficult to go back into that childlike state, or don't look at life so seriously in today's society when all we're doing is kind of in this comparison mode.
Yeah, because that's how our society is built. Because, the society, if you look back for the last 100 years, was built on creating a workforce, creating people who have very little emotion, who will show up for work at 9 in the morning and leave at 5, and then have their very limited dreams and just continue to show up to perform so that, some corporations and businesses could continue to expand. But ultimately, to connect to that childlike piece inside of you doesn't really work in this heavy structure, because you need flexibility. You need to be able to say, hey, I need to take a break right now. I need to go take care of myself. I need to fill my cup again so I can continue giving. And I think the structure we have in place right now is just not supportive of that.
In terms of what structure, in terms of the society
Oh,
today?
the work structure, the school structure. I mean, I think it starts in school, right? When you
Mm.
take a kid which is creative and expressive and put it in a classroom to sit there for 6 or 7 hours a day and then go home and do another 2 hours of homework, that doesn't support connection with self. That doesn't support connection with being enough. It's always this, hey, you need to do more. You are not, like none of the kids I know go through their schooling time and say, oh my God, I'm so happy. They were more stressed out that they can't meet their deadlines and they can't follow up with their homework and that they have to get up early the next day to sit in school. And at the same time, saying, I don't think school is a bad thing because I think the biggest value in school is that they get off their iPads and they get to hang out with other kids and they get to connect socially. But certainly there is something we need to do in the future for our future children to really have a better experience there and not be trained into these beings that just always feel like they're not enough.
Mm. I think we got a glimpse into that in terms of the pandemic. It was like the very first time where everybody obviously disconnected from that social connection, and everybody might had to work remotely, and there was almost this clarity, I know, in my household of, okay, like, I mean, some of these things that we bother ourselves with so much on a day-to-day basis in terms of like these deadlines or schooling or whatever is really not that important. And you got a lot of people missing that connection, that deep rooted relationships and face to face time together. And I feel like we're almost seeing some sort of a upheaval or an upheaval to the whole online social media disconnection back into this connection, eye to eye, face to face, a deeper connection, person to person. And maybe as to why all these communities are popping up left, right, and center, and I'm putting an emphasis on that connection with others.
Yeah, and that quality connection, right? That connection of others who have the same goals, who wanna improve, who wanna be more in the present moment. And I think it's something the yogis have been doing for thousands of years, where they would move away from the busy cities and go up into the mountains and live in small communities and just practice what gave them the connection rather than, being in this distracted world where, yeah, nothing was ever enough because there was always more to do the next day.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially living in Dubai, it can be difficult sometimes because it's such a busy city. It's constantly evolving and moving forward. But there are small pockets of communities popping up where people are connecting, kind of grounding themselves into the present moment, and not really, not really kind of striking a balance between that, between, okay, it's hustle culture or whatever Monday to Friday, and then at the weekends it's more deep rooted spirituality connection. It's quite, I've never seen the two conflicting things almost survive at the same time. It's these people on the weekend are deeply spiritual, but then Monday to Friday is very office driven or office based or kind of hustle culture. I initially had a lot of issues with that because it felt like two separate forms of myself,
Hmm.
and I definitely struggle to keep that aligned sometimes.
Yeah, but at the same time, at least they're connecting on the weekend with their spirituality rather than going out and going crazy and partying like wild, right? So there's also that balance where you can say, okay, at least they get a little glimpse of what it can be like. Maybe they're not in a position yet where they can let go of their 9 to 5, but it's allowing them to have an experience of something, which then later in life might allow them to strive for more of that in the totality of their lives.
Yeah, and it's been okay with the it's definitely been okay with partaking in some of the, like, sometimes in my past I've almost viewed kind of financial pursuit as something that was negative, but again it's kind of rounding back to this: in order to fill my cup I can pour it out to many more people. So it's definitely that aspect as well. In terms of your kind of purpose or your mission, like what is your mission, Amrit?
Really to impact the world one person at a time. I really enjoy working one on one with people and just allowing them to think outside the box and say there is more to life than you might have learned from your parents or what you experienced in the first half of your life. And just kind of open vision to what's possible. And then to inspire them at the same time to make a different choice and to overcome those fears and overcome those self imposed limitations and say, I can recreate my life how I want to create it. I'm not just a victim that has to do this for the rest of my days until I die because there's no other opportunity. So that's really for me my focus.
And how I've had a kind of previous experience with, like, it's hard to help someone to change by telling them how to change.
Yeah.
Rather, you show, like, it's almost up to the person to make the change themselves, and it's only you asking the questions. Is that something that you experience?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I very much stopped telling people how to change because it doesn't do much. And even if they listen, it's very short-lived because it's not their own change. So it's much more about helping people find their why. Why do they want to change? And if that why gets crystal clear, then they will make the right choices and start changing one little bit at a time.
So if there's somebody listening to this and they want to change, how would you suggest that they get to that why?
Oh, there's many ways. It really comes down how quickly and how efficiently do you want to do this? And if you say, hey, I've waited so many years. I really want to progress quickly on this path to change. My recommendation would be get yourself help. Get yourself a coach who can support you in this journey. Get yourself someone who's already walked the path and who you can connect with and bounce yourself off with and really get out of that loop of trying to figure it out yourself. A lot of people, myself included, for years and years, just try to do it myself. But the moment I allowed someone in to hold up the mirror and to question me and to question my beliefs, my ability to change and to grow just expanded exponentially. And so that would be my recommendation. If you're really serious about it, make a commitment, get yourself the help, and you'll see how much quicker you move.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you, Emery. It's been a pleasure. Where can some of my listeners find you?
Probably the easiest way is through Instagram or Facebook. I'm also active on TikTok. There's a lot of material out there. You can probably have the links in the show notes. And, just reach out. I mean, I answer all my messages myself. So if someone is really interested, just start a conversation. Just open that space and see what comes.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Emery. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Brian.